Hi, I'm Jennifer Potter, Executive Director of Be Well Texas. Too many people are struggling alone these days, and alcohol and drug deaths are increasing. We started Be Well Texas to offer high-quality, science-based addiction treatment and recovery services anywhere, virtually or in person. In many cases, there is no cost for treatment or medications if you don't have insurance. Really. Welcome to Be Well Texas. We're glad you're here. Visit bewelltexas.org.
Oh, welcome to the Gambling Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Money Mainville. We've got another episode for you tonight. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. It is another wonderful day on the YouTube world. If you're listening via the Republic of Football Network, we enjoy you as well. If you catch it up on Patreon, patreon.com/Gambling Gauchos, you're also welcome. All right. On the BHW Law Firm rundown today, Texas Tech basketball, mostly. Yeah, Texas Tech basketball. Somebody said, Money Vaneville, that there's a certain 5-star receiver that could or could not be back in the mix. This marks the second time we've recorded an episode together in which some possibly breaking news involving Micah Hudson is involved. So we'll maybe talk about that or not. I don't know. It's all rumor at this point. But as a great man once said, could be, couldn't be. We don't know. All right. So that is the Barnett Howard Williams rundown. And always, if you've been run down, suffering a catastrophic injury, Barnett Howard Williams is there for you. BHW Law Firm, double Texas Tech graduates. They love the school. They love you. They can help you out if you're dealing with a criminal offense, family law, Title IX issues. They are based in Fort Worth, but do work across this great state of Texas, and they will be there for you. Barnett Howard Williams, bhwlawfirm.com for more information. All right, Money. I said on this very podcast before the Iowa State game that I was peeking ahead. Peeking ahead at the schedule, buddy. And I said, if they beat Iowa State, if they lose to Iowa State, kind of looking at this schedule, and Kansas State, Arizona, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and TCU all look gettable. Here we are a couple of games later, 3-0, with what I would call an ugly win in Manhattan, a dominant finish against Arizona that we'll talk about, and after about 6 minutes, really a wire-to-wire win against Cincinnati. So 3-0 in the last three, 4-0 on the road for the first time in program history. The defense is good. The offense is great. What are we seeing here from Texas Tech basketball?
Yeah, I've been excited for us to talk, Rob, because you were bullish on that Arizona game. And I was skeptical. I did not like the matchup. I did not think you fared well, especially if JT Toppin was not fully healthy. And then I tweeted in the post game, and I've been waiting for you to call me out for tooting my own horn without respecting you for being way more bullish on that game than I was. But what I did say, and you called it from the get-go, you said Texas Tech is winning this game. They're due. Arizona is due for a loss. This game belongs to Texas Tech, so kudos to you for that. What I did say was, if this is a 2-possession game at the under 4 media timeout, the last media timeout of the game, Texas Tech will win. Arizona has been dreadful in close games this season. It's really been the bane of their existence. And Texas Tech has been good enough. They were not good in close games under Grant McCaslin last year. They have been better this year, even with a close loss to St. Joe's and Iowa State and UCF. They've still been better. And so I said, hey, if this game comes down to crunch time and it's, within a couple of baskets, I think Texas Tech wins this one. And they just stepped on the jugular. Like, very similar to what we saw against Kansas State, very different style of game. I think the Kansas State game was kind of who can be less ugly. This game against Arizona was really more about who had a greater will to win. And I think Texas Tech proved that they did. And Arizona, once again, looked like a fish out of water when it mattered most. And so that game was really, really tight for most of the game. Like, my dad doesn't watch a ton of Texas Tech basketball. I'm trying to get him there, but he did watch all of this game. And he was like, man, that was a fun game. And I was like, was it? Because it didn't really look like it was going to be that fun until the Red Raiders smelled some blood in the water. And then they realized, like, this game is here for the taking. Let's go get it. And then they did. So I think kudos to them for managing to pull that off, understanding the opponent and their tendencies and their weaknesses is always going to be huge. And just having a guy in the huddle, like a coach, a veteran, whoever it may be, who can say, these guys have struggled all season long in these situations. We know who we are. Let's go out and prove it. I think was what won Texas Tech this game. Huge game from JT Toppin. I thought he looked really, really sharp in this one. Chance McMillan, Christian Anderson again. I'm sure we'll talk about him later in the podcast. I definitely want to. But just a really complete team win. This offense continues to look really, really good. And again, very different flavor of defensive performance in the closing minutes of a game. But again, you hold an opponent 5+ minutes without scoring before the final buzzer. That is wild for a team that has not been known for their defense this season.
I thought Texas Tech against Arizona did a really good job at the end of that game defensively. I don't quite know how to say this, but letting Arizona choke. Like, they didn't try to do too much. They kept Arizona in front of them, and they didn't let them miss a bunch of threes. It's not exactly what they did, but they just kind of had them frazzled enough that they just started chucking threes. And I don't know if that's great defense or great coaching or poor coaching on the other end. But whatever it was, I think since you did it twice in a row, it feels like something you were doing defensively and not just, wow, Arizona sucked at the end of that game, because I do feel like you turned up the pressure a bit. You had hands and faces. You weren't fouling. You weren't allowing easy buckets down low. And Caleb Love was really just chucking them. I mean, it didn't look like they had a plan whatsoever. And you kept your cool, I guess, more than anything.
What's crazy about this, I just fact-checked this because I haven't had the time to kind of zoom out and take this game in the scope of the whole season yet, but this game against Arizona was the second best adjusted defensive efficiency that a Texas Tech team has posted under Grant McCaslin. The first was his debut performance against Texas A&M Commerce. And you did that in a Big 12 game against, sure, an opponent who has kind of been hard to feel out throughout the season. And I think they're adjusting to the level of play that the Big 12 has to offer. But to post your second best adjusted defensive efficiency as a team against Arizona is impressive. And I think obviously a large part of that comes down to outscoring them 19-6 in the final 10 minutes of this game.
Now, I know defensively you're not the same kind of team that you were the last time you went to the Sweet 16. That team was all 6'6" and lanky and just a nightmare defensively, the best defensive team you've seen maybe ever at Texas Tech, yada, yada. Certainly the best in the last 5 seasons. You could argue about maybe the national championship appearance, but that team, defensively, not what I'm talking about. Offensively, stay with me here a little bit. That team was not good offensively consistently.
Yeah.
But when they were at their best for stretches, that team offensively had a big man who was consistent offensively. Yep. And they had 2 guards that had good nights whenever. Maybe it was Kevin McCullough and TJ Shannon. Maybe it was Kevin McCullough and Adonis
Arms. Yeah.
Maybe it was this guy. Maybe it was that guy. I'm kind of seeing that from this team. They're better shooters, but you're going to have either Darian Williams or JT Toppin be really good in the paint, and then you're just going to get 15 from somebody and 12 from somebody else. And if it's Overton or Chance McMillan or Christian Anderson, it just feels like that kind of offense where, yeah, we're going to get our offense going. We have one guy we really rely on or 2 guys we really rely on, and then 5 other guys that can also do it. I think there were 6 or 7 guys on that team that went to the Sweet 16 that averaged around 10 or more. I think you're going to do that again this year. Now, the big difference is, I think why this offense is better is because you have Elijah Hawk, because you have a point guard. And that team had 3 threes and then a 4 and a 5 basically on the time, most of the time. So I really am excited about this offense because I don't think it's ever dead.
Yeah.
Because you're not just playing through one guard, which in the NCAA tournament sometimes works for 3 weekends. See Kimball Walker or whoever.
Didn't last year.
It didn't last year. So sometimes you need 4 different guys to have 20-point games in 3 different weeks. And I think you have that ability on this offense.
Yeah, and I've kind of zoomed out, and I've been looking at the season as a whole already, which is probably premature. There's still a lot of basketball left to play, and a lot of really important games that are still undecided. But to think about it in the grand scheme of things, right? When Grant McCaslin was first hired, I was so excited about the defense. This is a coach who has made his living on the defensive end, has always put together competitive defensive teams. His offenses, while they had been efficient, were typically slow and not super explosive. And then you get to last year, and I think your offense was better than your defense last year. Not great on either end, but I think your offense was better than your defense last year. This year, your defense is more than serviceable, top 30 in the country. And I think this is going to end up being the best Texas Tech offense since 1997 in the old James Dickey era. I mean, they are on track to be a top 10 offense. And I think part of that is balance. I think you've done an excellent job of organizing this roster to be balanced. You have Elijah Hawkins, who has been absolute nails in conference play. Even with an off night against Cincinnati, he's been one of the best point guards in the country. You have JT Toppin, who feels you at least have like a 65% chance of him making a shot anytime you get it to him in the low post, but you're not having to feed it to him. I think that was a really good point that Tech Hoops guy made today on Twitter was he's getting you baskets, but even with how great Bryson Williams was, you kind of had to feed it to him. You didn't really have any other option if you wanted to get him a good look. You had to feed it to him down low, force the defense to collapse, and then he would initiate off of that. With this team, you can give it to Toppin down low, and even Federico on a screen at the top of the key, he's made some very, very high level passes. And I think we saw some of that coming to fruition last year with Warren Washington and Grant McCaslin trying to use him in some of those actions at the top of the key. But even Federico has been really good in those actions to cutters going towards the basket. But even this year, okay, if we want to get a Hawkins screen and low to JT Toppin, if that doesn't pan out, what's next? Okay, we have Chance McMillan, who's shooting 50% from three. We have Christian Anderson, who's been one of the best freshmen to come through this program since at least Jamias Ramsey. And even he was really the primary option on that team. Christian Anderson is really a complementary piece to what this team is doing as a whole. You have Darion Williams, who was an all Big 12 player last year. I don't think he's playing his best basketball yet. I think that's still to come. You've Kern Walton, who's just been invisible, who was one of the best offensive players in the country last year. He's not even having to do anything because there's so many options between McMillan, Williams, Anderson, Overton at times. I thought Overton had a great game against Cincinnati. This team just feels so well balanced. There's a ton of good shooters on this roster. I really do think that this team is going to go as the offense goes. And if they can continue to play serviceable defense, then the ceiling is pretty high. It's too early to talk about the ceiling is Sweet 16 or, the ceiling is Final Four. I'll leave that to the people with the blue checks who make money based on how many likes and comments and reposts they get. But this is a very, very, very good offensive team. And the advanced analytics will tell you this is the best offensive team that has come through Texas Tech since at least 1997. And even then, basketball back then don't look like basketball now. It's a very different game. I think this team is modern, which is something that I felt like was lacking in the past two administrations on offense. They're modern, they're fast-paced, they can shoot the ball. And if their defense is good enough to hang, then they're going to be really, really dangerous.
Since 97, so does that mean the 96 offense or from 97?
Yeah, 96, 97 offense finished 10th in the country. Okay. And adjusted offensive efficiency, you have not finished top 10 since then. Right now, you're 8th. Last year, you were 27th. The highest you were in the Beard and Adams administrations was 25th. And that was obviously the year that you were playing for it all on that one fateful Monday night.
I would have guessed it was 95. I thought it was the last. Now, some of these ones are vacated, but I thought it was the last season of the Southwest Conference. You went 30 games. Was it the year after that your offense was great?
Yeah, I'd have to check because Kim Palm only goes back to 1996 to 97. But based on his model, which I probably trust more than just looking at it by my naked eye, this is your best offensive team since then.
All right, let's go to the Cincinnati game. You mentioned earlier that Hawkins had an off night. And if I told you in the last, 5 years that the Texas Tech point guard had a bad night, what would you just guess the stat line was? 4 points,
2 assists,
2 assists, and 6 turnovers. I mean,
yeah.
Well, a bad night for Elijah Hawkins is 8 points. 3 turnovers and 2 assists?
Yeah, I think he had 2 turnovers, 3 assists, and 3 steals.
Yeah, that's how good he's been playing. That is an off night in the Big 12 for him. The assist, he still had more assists than turnovers, which has not been the case when your point guard had a bad night at least the last 2 years. But even back further than that, it just has been so refreshing to have a guy taking care of the ball. That's what we thought we were going to get when he got here. And it wasn't the case really until maybe in spurts. But we talked about Elijah Hawkins as being, out of control a bit early in the season through non-conference and just not really grasping what was going on. And then they went to Utah, and he made a bunch of threes and was like, oh, I can play in the Big 12. And all of a sudden, he's been a revelation for the last month. So it's been exciting to see with Elijah Hawkins. And if you can score 81 points and Elijah Hawkins and Darian Williams combined for 12, I think you're in a really good spot. Really good spot. Now, specifically from the Cincinnati game, I thought it was going to be similar to the game Kansas played with Cincinnati. Or similar to the Kansas State Texas Tech game, honestly. I thought it was going to be 62-58. Close game, ugly, nobody scoring because I respected Cincinnati's defense. And that's exactly what we got for the first 8 minutes. And then Kevin Overton, Christian Anderson, maybe Chance made a bucket there in the end of the second half, but you reel off, I think, 24 in the last 7 minutes to get to over 40 in the first half. Just a ridiculous run to end, to take a lead, and you really didn't give it back. Was that your best full half in Big 12 play, that second half against Cincinnati? Because, I mean, your best 10 minutes is probably the finish to the Arizona game, but you really went wire to wire from 12 points to 6 points lead and didn't really ever look like you were going to give it away except for that fast break to Jizzle James.
Yeah, I mean, you only outscored them by 6 points in the second half, which is kind of crazy to think about because that's not what it felt like watching the game. It felt like they were trying to creep back in, but every time they did that, you kind of stepped on their throats and ended their chances of surviving. It was really impressive. I mean, I don't know how many teams in the country can afford their lead guard and their best player having bad nights and still winning and still scoring 16 points above what the opposing defense has allowed that year. I mean, Darian Williams, based on box plus minus, which again, it's a catch-all metric. It's not perfect, but I do think it's a good way of getting kind of a bite-sized sample of what happened that game. Darian Williams had his worst game since Vanderbilt last year in Fort Worth, where Pop Isaacs was good, Joe Toussaint was good, Kerwin Walton had a really good game, Chance McMillan was good. There was enough in that game to take care of a bad Vanderbilt team. This was a conference game on the road against a really good defense, and two of your starters did not look good. And you won. You won by 10. And even when it felt like they were trying to creep back in, I think you did enough to put them away. And again, I think it goes back to the overarching conversation of roster construction, having multiple options who can put the ball in the basket, and having some sort of an identity. And I think this team, for all that's been complained about them, for all the complaints I've had about them, for all the concerns I've had about them, they have an identity. They know how to win games. And I think as soft as a non-conference as they played, which I will admit to and I think is fair to admit to, you have a very close loss to St. Joseph's, a 1-point loss. You have a close win against Syracuse, and you have a close loss against Texas A&M. And I think kind of the straw that broke the camel's back was Texas A&M. where again, you had a 2-possession loss. Sure, you lose at UCF or versus UCF. Sure, you lose against Iowa State, one of the best teams in the country. Those games were 1-possession, 2-possession games. I think this team knows how to play as a team when it matters most. And I think if they can get the game into a position where it's within 2 possessions, 3 possessions with 4 to go, I would take this team to win almost any game in that situation.
It's kind of crazy. You're like 6 points away from being in the top 10. Like, I mean, if you beat St. Joseph's and Texas A&M and Iowa State, if you beat UCF too, I mean, you're Houston. Better than Houston, really. Now,
Yeah.
Houston has been murdering people. I think I said myrtleizing a couple of weeks ago. They did it again. They did it again today. I think they held Utah to 37.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And I was starting to think Utah was not bad. I mean, they got to 3-3. Now they're 3-4. But I don't know. They were. I'm just, when good teams lose, how do they respond? Texas Tech responded to a close loss against Iowa State and won 3 games. Iowa State lost to West Virginia and just pissed all over whoever they beat yesterday. Was it 108 to 54 or whatever? Who they beat?
UCF, I believe.
Yeah. Just murdered them. And then Utah didn't lose, or I mean, Houston didn't lose, but they played a close game against UCF this weekend. And wanted to prove that they were still the big dogs. So I'm looking around this Big 12 landscape money, and I think Houston's the best team. I do. I think Iowa State is the second best team. I do. I'm having a hard time saying Texas Tech is at number 3 right now.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think Iowa State and Houston are kind of a toss-up for me. I think Iowa State not having Momcilovic, my GOAT, might end up hurting them, but they have enough depth to, I think, survive that. I think Houston's defense is Houston's defense. There's really not much more to say about that. I do know that Emmanuel Sharp for Houston, one of their top guards, was in a boot before this Utah game and did not play in this Utah game. And they still almost doubled up Utah. It's just unreal. And I was kind of looking at my moneyless picks this morning, and I'm looking at the spreads, and I'm like, I hate that I have to pick any of these 3 games. Like, Utah beat TCU. What are they? Like, they're 20-point dogs in this game. Like, is this Utah offense, like, they can't keep it within 20? And, like, I ultimately ended up siding with the Utes, which was a mistake. Kansas is 6.5-point favorites against TCU on the road. TCU, what are they? Lost to Utah, but coming off a big ranked win, what are they? And I'm just like making my picks. I'm like trying to be analytical and smart about this. And I'm like, man, like I might have a better win rate if I was like picking Patriot League games at this rate. Like this league is just absurd. I think there are certainly some teams that have solidified themselves at the bottom. I think Oklahoma State is there. I think Colorado is there. I think Utah is certainly trending that direction, although I was curious to see how they would settle in. But then the top, I mean, you go and you look at the top, 11 of KenPom right now. Number 3, Houston. Number 4, Iowa State. number 5 Kansas, or number 7 Kansas, number 11 Texas Tech. Like, there are 4 teams, 5 teams that are legit contenders. That's just how good this league is. And even in a year where I think the SEC is getting a lot of respect, and to some degree I think it's fair, the Big 12 is still the Big 12. And there are still the top 3 to 5 teams in this league will always be good enough to compete down the stretch in March. And I think Texas Tech is squarely in that conversation. I mean, you are 11th in KenPom right now with the 8th best offense, which I still think has a lot of potential to get better. I think the way that you do that is by shooting free throws. Larger conversation. We can talk about the whistle that Texas Tech has gotten this year. We can talk about the style of play that's gotten them there, whatever. They are 311th in free throw rate right now. This team is not getting free shots at the line. If they start getting free shots at the line to complement what their offense is doing as a whole, how much better is this offense? You look at the defense is 40th right now in KenPom. Okay, that's not amazing. It's not groundbreaking. Is it good enough to win? Yeah, sure. But your turnover rate isn't great. You're not forcing the opponent to turn the ball over a lot. What happens if you turn up the pressure a little bit? Let Elijah Hawkins pick up 3 quick fouls, 26 minutes into the game and see what happens. I think that there is still a lot of potential for this Tech team to get better. And I think that's why if you want to look at the top of the Big 12 and you want to look at Houston, Iowa State, and Kansas, and Texas Tech, and you were to genuinely ask me as a trying to take off the scarlet and black glasses and tell me which one of those 4 teams has the potential to get better, I really do think it's Texas Tech. I really do.
Kansas beat TCU tonight 74-61. The final in that Utah-Houston game, 70-36 earlier tonight.
Oof.
Have you seen the Kansas State-Baylor score at halftime?
I have not.
Just wild guess, Money.
Give me 36-31 Baylor on top.
Kansas State 30, Baylor 26.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, Baylor might be bad.
Now, Baylor's 11-6 and 3-3 in Big 12 play. But, they beat Utah. They lost to Iowa State in Ames. They beat Cincinnati. They beat Arizona State in Tempe by 6. Then they lost by 11 to Arizona on the road. Then they lost to TCU at home by 3. And now at home against Kansas State, they're losing at halftime. It doesn't seem good for Baylor at this point. They beat St. John's by a point early in the season. They beat Arkansas, which doesn't look as good as it does now. Their other wins, Sam Houston, Tarleton, they lost to Tennessee by 15. New Orleans, Abilene Christian, Norfolk, Arlington Baptist. And then Arlington Baptist doesn't even have a logo on ESPN. And then they lost to UConn by 4. So I don't know. They played some good teams. They didn't beat any good ones. And here they are struggling in Big 12 play. I don't know if they win tonight. I think Baylor can get it going. They can figure it out. They could be a bubble team. They could be a tournament team. But man, a loss to Kansas State at home is stinky.
That's the last nail in the coffin. And I try to be analytical in almost all of my analysis. Baylor, when they lost to TCU at home the other night on a buzzer beater, which was a great game, the only player to stay out and sing the alma mater was Norchad Armir. One player stayed out there and sung the fight song with a GA and an assistant coach. Look,
Wow.
I'm a numbers guy. I'm always going to look at what the numbers are telling me. I think the numbers are the most important thing all the time. There is a degree that culture plays in college basketball, especially. I don't think it matters whatsoever in the NBA. But in college basketball, culture and belief and togetherness are unmeasurable, but really, really important. And I think Scott Drew has done a great job of establishing that DNA in his teams in years past. He's had incredibly talented teams, no doubt about that. But I think part of what's made those teams so good is that DNA. I don't know if they have that this year. And I don't think it's helping their cause as they kind of spuddle through this Big 12 slate because they have not been impressive to me. And I came into the year thinking that they had one of the best starting fives in the Big 12. I mean, VJ Edgecombe is a lottery pick, top 10 at least. Norchad Armia, one of the most experienced players in college basketball. Jeremy Roach, incredibly experienced. They've got a lot of good continuity on their bench, and they don't look like they know how to play basketball together right now.
Who did they come back and beat? Was that? Oh, that was St. John's.
Mm-hmm.
Like 7 overtimes or whatever crazy it was.
Crazy finish.
I mean, I watched that game and thought, wow, Baylor never gives up. It's a Scott Drew team. They're tough. They can make clutch shots. And you really just haven't seen it since. I cannot figure out Baylor. I think I have a good grasp on what Houston is. I think I have a good grasp on what Iowa State is. I think I have a good grasp on Arizona. I certainly have a grasp on what Texas Tech is. Kansas, I mean, we know what they are. We know who they are. I was talking to a Kansas fan today, Clint Scott, and if you know, he said the offense will be better without KJ Adams, which is half copium and half, probably, because he's not a polished offensive player. But if he misses a bunch of time, and I have no idea what he's missing for, but
shoulder.
Yeah, is it the shoulder? I just that kind of athletic presence, getting 4 crucial rebounds in a stretch and yamming it down to kill the opponent. I don't know, it feels like a big piece of the team. Now, Kansas fans have never really liked KJ Adams. He's never really lived up to what he was supposed to be, in my opinion, at least according to Kansas fans. So I do think that's a little bit of copium, but that could be true. So I'm not real sure what Kansas is over the next couple of weeks. What the hell's going on with West Virginia?
Yeah, that is the most confusing team in the country to me right now.
Lose to Arizona by 20, beat Colorado, lose to Houston by 15, beat Iowa State, lose to Arizona State by 10. Like, beat Kansas.
Yep.
Beat Kansas in Lawrence, I believe.
Uh-huh.
At Kansas. Then they hammer Oklahoma State by 20. And then it's big loss, win, big loss, win, big loss. And it's wins over Kansas and Iowa State and losses to Arizona State, Arizona, and Houston, which Arizona State looks decent, but not.
I guess, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the Big 12, but I think Texas Tech is certainly in the top 4, and I would not be surprised to see them finish in the top 4 of the Big 12, which is honestly more important than ever. Have you looked at the Big 12 tournament slate?
I'm not.
So I was doing a little peeking the other day. I think similar to the SEC tournament, it's the old double bye. So it's 4 teams get the double bye, and then like 4 teams play the first night, they move on, play 4 teams in the second round that all got a bye. So it's like the first 8 teams get a bye, and then those 4 winners move on to play the top 4, which I guess that means 12 teams make it. That doesn't make any sense. No, because there'd be 8 teams in the first round, so that'd be 16. Yeah, so there's 16 teams, 4 move on to play the next. No, that's 8 teams, 4 games, move on to 4 teams with a bye. That's 12 teams. Move on to 4 teams with a bye. That's 16. Yeah. So there's that. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I do think it's important because in some respects that's 2 extra wins because you're in the Final 4 or the Final 8, I guess, booked into the Big 12 tournament. Then you get 1 and you're a Big 12 semifinalist and win 2 games and you're in the finals of the Big 12 tournament, and maybe you're playing somebody who's played 4 games. I don't know. So it's important to have those opportunities. Even if you're playing somebody who's fresh, they've at least played 1 more game than you, and you'll be fresh with the top 4. I don't think you'll need the Big 12 tournament to get in the NCAA tournament, but it's been interesting to see, JR, Bracketology, Hick, and Lenardi, and Rothstein, and all these yahoos saying, oh, wait, Texas Tech's building a resume. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, no shit. Excuse me, family show. It's the Big 12. We all knew this was going to happen, I guess, except for you people. Win Big 12 games, you look good. So I think it's a little patience on Texas Tech's part. They were 25 in the coaches poll, essentially 26 in the AP poll, but they got like 100 points in the votes. And the next team, the 27th team, had like 30. So if you beat Oklahoma State, you'll certainly be ranked.
Yeah.
If you beat TCU, you'll probably shoot up the rankings pretty well. I'm not saying that this is rigged or anything, Money, but if ESPN did have a hand in the AP poll, they probably want Houston and Texas Tech to be a top 20 matchup if you win.
Which does not feel like it's worked in Tech's favor very well in recent history. Even before Houston was in the Big 12 and you played them at Dickies, it does not feel like when that has been a highly anticipated matchup that has gone in the Red Raiders' favor very frequently, and understandably so. That's a great program, but yeah, it's wild just the parity, the level of difficulty in this conference. I mean, you enter the conference slate, you lose to UCF at home, and it looks like the projected metrics are telling you you're probably going to top out at like an 8 seed, and you decide to mess around and win 4 games in the Big 12 on the road, and now you're like topped out at a 4 seed. I mean, it's just crazy. If you can take care of business in this conference, especially on the road, you control your own destiny. I think that's a massively overused and overblown phrase, but I really do think it's true in Big 12 basketball. And I think it's why the Big 12 has been criticized in years past for soft non-conference schedules. But I think this team is the perfect example of, if you can take care of your business in conference play and play just a quality enough of an opponent in the non-conference to fill yourself out and at least have something on your resume, you're going to be just fine.
One more basketball-related question as far as resumes go. Just looking at the schedule, you've played 3 home games in the Big 12, 1 and 2, which feels like you're leaving yourself a pretty thin margin at home. You need to win a bunch of home games to really be where you want to be. You can't go 500 at home. But you started 4-0 on the road, so you have 6 more road contests. How important is it to have some leeway on the road in the Big 12? I guess it only really matters if you win a bunch of home games because it all adds up together. So it's all going to the same place, as they say. But it just feels like you have a real opportunity because you've set yourself up and because you've been so good at home. It just feels like it's all coming together here in a good way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of coaches in this league will openly tell you that they approach road games like they are opportunities to steal a win. Nobody really thinks about going on the road in this conference as a cupcake or an easy win opportunity. It is always a challenge. It is always you are going to have to play your best basketball to win road games in this conference. And not only have you given yourself a 4-game cushion already very early into Big 12 play, you have been the second best offensive team in the country on the road this season. The only team in college basketball that's been better than you offensively on the road has been Auburn, who is the best team in the country overall. And so you are not only surviving and stealing games on the road, you have truly played your best basketball when you have been on the road. I mean, your offensive efficiency goes to 13th at home from second. You drop 11 spots in the national rankings compared to away and home. And again, you've played more games at home. That happens whenever you schedule a week non-conference. But just think about the competitive advantage that the USA has historically been, and think about the fact that this team is playing so much better on the road so far. I think that is what really gets me excited and also just anticipating how much better this team can be. Because on the road, you have Houston left, which is going to be a really, really tough game. First game of February. You have Arizona a week after that, which I think will be a tough game. That's a tough environment, but you've already beat them once. So I think you at least have film on them. You go to Oklahoma State, who is playing in front of 3 fans right now. You go to Fort Worth and play TCU, which has historically been a favorable crowd for you. You go to Kansas. The Fog is never an easy place to win. But maybe. We'll circle back on that game closer to March. And then you go to Tempe and you play Arizona State, who I'm still really skeptical about. Even if you split those remaining games, you've got one hell of a resume if you can take care of your business at home. And I mean,
Yeah,
you don't.
if you go 3-3 on the road, you're 6-4 on the road.
Yeah. And you've got Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, Arizona State, West Virginia, Houston, and Colorado left at home.
Yeah. I mean, I'm having a hard time saying you're not 13-7 as like a baseline in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Now, if I gave you 13-7 or told you to roll the dice, what would you do? Or asked you if you wanted to roll the dice, I guess.
I'd probably take it.
Yeah.
KenPom right now has you, based on win probabilities, has you at 14-6 in Big 12 play, which would be lovely. T-Rank has you at 13-7. So you're right on the edge of kind of what the predictive metrics are telling you.
What record wins the Big 12? Houston's 6-0, 7-0, whatever they are now. I mean, Are they going to go 17-3?
Yeah.
Iowa State's lost 1. Let's say they're 16-4. I really think that's the only 2 teams that are going to do that. I mean, I think 14-6 has you in the top 4. Maybe with some tiebreakers, you're 5th or 6th, but I think you, along with Kansas and Arizona, maybe just those 3 are the teams that can really get to that 15-win mark. Certainly the 16-win mark. I don't see Texas Tech doing that, but stranger things have happened here, Money.
Yeah, Houston's projected record right now is 18-2, which means they're not losing another game. Iowa State is 16-4, and Kansas is at 13-7. So you control your own destiny. I mean, I think Houston ends up winning the regular season title. I think they've got a favorable schedule to do that. I also think they have a good enough team to do that. But if you can compete among Iowa State 16-4 and Kansas 13-7, you're gonna probably finish in the top 3 of this conference. You should.
If you finish this win streak I predicted, which I don't know if you will or won't, it is what it is there. You'll be 7-2 in Big 12 play. Let's say you lose on the road in Houston. 7-3. 7-3 start. And I think the schedule was tougher in the first 10 than it is in the second 10.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
It just feels like you have some good momentum now, but you have to beat Oklahoma State. You have to beat TCU. This is a really important week for March, in my opinion. I mean, these are 2 really important home games.
It's a short turnaround, too. I think you get 2 days of rest.
Sunday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sunday and Wednesday.
So even though they're not the highest caliber opponents, I think you cannot fall asleep on Oklahoma State, even though I do not trust them whatsoever, and I do not think they're a good basketball team this year. No team in this conference is ever worth not respecting. You will get caught in a trap game. You got to take care of them, and you've got to immediately after that game start looking at the tape on TCU, because that TCU team, again, beat Baylor in Waco. Who knows what Baylor is, but still, that is a tough place to win. They did it. You got to respect that they can do it to you too, and plan for that.
Oklahoma State sucks.
So bad.
But it seems like the worse they are, the better Texas Tech is, the closer those games are. It just feels like mathematics there. So nobody respects Oklahoma State more than I do. All right, that is 53 minutes of just solid basketball action. I believe, Money, we're going to do a special mailbag episode tomorrow with maybe a special guest. How does that sound? Teasing it right now. I have no idea who the guest will be, but we'll figure it out. Then we'll reconvene next Wednesday or maybe even Thursday after that TCU game and talk more Texas Tech basketball. Of course, this game on Sunday, also on Sunday, the Chiefs and the Bills, which I think is a legacy game for both of those guys. Josh Allen this feels like Broncos Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
When Peyton Manning's at the end of his career, and those are 2 old quarterbacks going against each other with the big rivalry. But Manning needed that game so badly for his legacy. They win, they go in the Super Bowl. Now, these are two young quarterbacks, but the accolades that Patrick has, Josh Allen desperately needs to beat him in the playoffs if he wants to keep pace in any kind of legacy talk or really have any kind of rivalry with Patrick. And of course, the Bills have never won a Super Bowl. So to get to a fifth or sixth Super Bowl in their history, to finally win one, would be just so strong for Josh Allen's legacy. And obviously on Patrick's side, a fourth ring, the first three-peat ever, the most dominant 7-year stretch in NFL history. There's just so much riding on that game. And I can't believe Tom Brady's going to have to be there and witness it if it is Patrick. It's just so beautiful. It was written that way. I guarantee you the script writers had a hand in that. And then on the other side, old Clifford Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback who's doing things no other rookie quarterback has done, quite literally. And they have an opportunity to upset the Eagles and Saquon. What are they calling him now? 2KSA? It's just one of the worst nicknames of all time. I mean, what do you think of when you hear SA now?
Yeah. Don't want to
That's
get demonetized.
Yeah, that's just, well, I already dropped an S-bomb, but I mean, that just is one of the worst nicknames of all time. But very excited for the NFL slate. So through the NFL playoffs, we'll continue to be in the midweek with these episodes. We'll get back to Sunday nights after. We'll probably do it during the Pro Bowl and then skip the Super Bowl Sunday and then go back to it after the Super Bowl. So there's our plan. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, hammer that subscribe button, comment your favorite cookie. Comment
Not
your
crumble.
cookie. Not crumble. We slandered Crumble in the Discord this week. If you want to join in on the Discord, Gambling Gauchos, patreon.com/Gambling Gauchos. We'll have it for you there. And Micah Hudson was either packing his apartment or begging Joey McGuire to take him back. One of the two. We don't know. We'll decide. Saw someone today with no blue check mark or even acting like an insider just tweeted announcements imminent. So we'll see what happens tomorrow with Micah Hudson. I'll say this much. I don't care. Yeah. If he comes back, I'll be happy. If he doesn't come back, I've already come to grips with that. And my recruiting philosophy, or at least following recruiting philosophy, has gotten to the point where whoever shows up, I'm rooting for. And I'm rooting for them for 1 year. And then whoever shows up next spring, I'll root for them. Because that just feels like what it's been. So we got some spring football dates. I'm sure we'll start talking a little football in the next couple of weeks as well. We'll rank the importance of every portal edition, and we'll take 7 hours to do it. Actually, one more thing, Money. This is a classic final segment here. Did you take a look at the roster at all? The spring roster?
Football?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a kid. It's basketball season. I shouldn't ask. There's a kid. The reason I bring it up is because there's a kid named Jalen Britton who is 6'7", and I was like, "Who is it? Like, who is this?" He wasn't in the roster, or he wasn't in the recruiting class. He wasn't in transfer, or one that was announced. So I saw him on the roster. I was like, I do not recognize his name. He's a tight end, 6'7". So I go, not a crazy popular name, Britton, Brattain, Bratton, whatever it is. I look this kid up, Money, and look, I'm going to say it, 6'7", looks like he's chiseled by the gods. I mean, it's just like, who is this kid? Tattoos everywhere. I start looking him up. He played LCU basketball with Parker Hicks. He went to high school at Shallowater, transferred from Seminole, and the last football stat I found from him was like 2 catches as a sophomore at Seminole. But I don't think he's played football since his sophomore year of high school. I think he could have played at Shallowater. LCU does not have a football team. He played a couple of seasons of basketball at LCU, and then he went and played at Chaminade. Are you familiar with Chaminade University? Chaminade. And then he came back to Tech last year and graduated. So I guess his grad study hobby is going to be walking on the football team in the spring. And again, 6'7". I think he's married and just wanting to play some ball, man. And look, I'm not going to say he's going to make the team and be a big piece, but it looks like he can be an athlete. I went back and found some LCU basketball highlights. He doesn't look like a slow basketball player. I mean, it looks like he was an athletic basketball player. So, name to watch. I don't know. I just feel like if you have that kind of skill set, it's translated before. We'll see if it can translate again. That would be an interesting name for me to watch there. Jalen Bratton. Bratton, I think is his name. Bratton.
Yeah, if you've got some crazy measurables and you play a sport other than football, call James Blanchard. Yeah. I'm sure he'd be interested to see what you can do on the gridiron.
Yep, absolutely. All right, final thoughts?
Big next 2 games at home to complete 5-game win streak. And really position yourself well to be competing for a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, although there is lots of basketball left to play. I do think that's where your resume would end up landing, is between that 4, 5, 6 seed range if you can take care of business these next 2 things. Again, having a number next to your name on the score bug doesn't mean a whole lot. But I think you're in a position to do that if you can take care of a really, really bad Oklahoma State team. So hopefully you do that. Hopefully there's no Cade Cunninghams or Cade Cunningham brothers on that sideline.
Lindy Waters.
Yeah, Lindy Waters, Isaiah Likely. Man, There's a lot of names. But, take care of your business. There will be a Robert Jennings. We'll see how that goes. His return to the USA. I'm looking forward to it, man. It's been a fun basketball season. Trying to get in a little bit of a better groove with writing. I've been doing, obviously, my 3 quick thoughts after every game, but wrote a pretty extensive piece on Kerwin Walton the other day. Going to be looking to do some more stuff like that throughout the remainder of the season as we really ramp up into importance time. Thinking about writing on Elijah Hawkins or Christian Anderson yet, because they both really intrigued me throughout the season. So, again, patreon.com/gambling gauchos. If you need a fix, I got you some basketball words waiting.
All right, I gave you a prediction last week. I'll give you one more. If Texas Tech, when we come back, is 7-2, and they've beaten Oklahoma State and TCU like they beat Cincinnati, there's the caveat. I mean, by, let's say 5 or 6, and then get some free throws at the end and put it away. Or even like Arizona, have a lead, put it away. If they do that 2 more times, they're beating Houston.
I'm just going to take you at your word because you seem to be a prophet. So,
okay. If they take care of business like we think they can. Now, if it's close games or final shots and buzzer beaters, if this, then that. All right, that's all I'm saying. All right. The pair of us, will see you next week. But we will have a mailbag this week as well. Stay tuned on Patreon. Love y'all.